Hello again, everyone. Welcome to 90s to Now, of course. I am Jerry Strauss. And folks, you've tuned into a really special episode this time out because, we've talked to a lot of people. We've talked to our favorite people from TV, from movies, from comedy, from music. But this is a bit of history. It's the first time that, and I can't believe I've built this joke up this long. The first time we're bringing some class onto this. We're going here because our guest today, you've seen her on 90210. You've seen her headlining shows like Pacific Palisades, Raising the Bar. You've seen her do everything throughout her career. But if you're a fan of the 90s, of course, you know her best as Lindsey from Saved by the Bell, the new class. Class is in session. How are you, Natalia?
Hi, I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, it's been so interesting how there is this look now onto the 90s, even my own son, like the 90s style. And so it's so cool. It's so cool having been a part of something that was so 90s. And I also say that 90s was the last great decade. So
I agree. I mean, look, it's a biased audience, but yes, you got a lot of people on your side with that one. I just blew right past your name, and that's actually the first thing I wanted to ask you, Natalia Cigliuti. Did I get that right?
you
I've
did.
been
You
practicing
did.
this all day. Okay.
Yes.
Has that been like a lifelong struggle for
Oh
you?
my gosh, we have so many inside jokes within my family too. How to pronounce it. I've gotten so many funny things happen. My brother specifically, like someone called him for it was, I don't know, trying to sell him a timeshare or something. And it was like they didn't really see the name before they started speaking. So then once the message came through, it's a voice memo we pass along because he was like Siglatai? It was the funniest thing. So yeah, it has happened. Cigliuti. In Spanish, it's actually Cigliuti. And then in Italian, it's Cigliuti. So Spanish Italian.
Wow. And you were born in Uruguay, right?
I wasn't actually born in Uruguay. My brothers and I are first generation born in the States. We were actually born in New York City, and then we went to Uruguay. I went to Uruguay with my family until I was 5 years old, and then back to the States. So Spanish was my first language, and then I learned English in school, and then I had Spanish and English school. English in school, Spanish at home. So I was able to have both languages without an accent, which is pretty cool.
That is, I was going to ask. I mean, I was going to say, you're just making Arnold Schwarzenegger look that much worse because, I mean, decades and decades that man has not shaken his a bit. And
yeah, having started, learning Spanish first and then starting to learn English when I was 5 years old, it worked perfectly because people, when I speak Spanish, and my Spanish is from like Argentina, Uruguay, which is a very specific accent. And like I said, I have both languages without an accent. People are like, oh my gosh. And it's helped me throughout my career because I've been able to work on Spanish commercials and Spanish stuff. So
that's really interesting. So in your career, and we're going to get into it a bit, all the different types of things you've done, which is pretty remarkable. Have you ever gone all the way to like the telenovela route, like to try to have you?
No, I have not.
Okay.
I haven't. Certainly, I've done soap operas. I was on All My Children, but the telenovelas, I have not really. Also, because my Spanish is also very specific, I can do other accents. I have to just kind of study them. But yeah, it would always be very. People that know the Spanish language and the different accents of like Mexico and Spain and of course Argentina and Uruguay, they'd be like, you're Argentinian because nobody's from Uruguay because it's such a small country. Everybody always just assumes that I'm from Argentina. So it would be very specific, but I wouldn't be opposed to it in the future.
Very cool. Very cool. Now, show business came to you pretty early. Is it true that you were discovered while you were actually on a modeling gig? Was that your first direction?
So it was actually I was in eighth grade. I would not consider it a modeling gig. My eighth grade school, my junior high school was putting on a fashion show, and so they allowed kids to be a part of it. And after the fashion show, which was super cute, like I still have pictures from. I'm gonna have to find them, but it was Will Wheaton's mom came up to my parents and said, have you thought, because Will Wheaton's sister, Amy, was a classmate of mine.
Hmm.
So she, her mom, Debbie, came up to my parents and was like, have you ever thought about putting your daughter in commercials? And I'm like, tell them yes, you want to do it. And so she really was the one that kind of organized everything for me, because obviously she was very familiar with the entertainment business, and so she sort of navigated my start and into like commercials. I remember in like 8th grade, I took she taught a commercial like technique class, which I took, and it kind of started slowly from there.
That's cool. So you did
Yeah.
commercials, and then was Saved by the Bell, the new class, your first major non-commercial role then?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I was 13 years old, I think, almost 14. And I auditioned for it, and it was all very, very fast. And yeah. And in fact, typically, like when you have auditions, which I learned much later, because this was still one of my first auditions to be in person, like you go to the callbacks, and you go to the studio and then the network, and then you go home. But like they told us that we booked the job when we auditioned for the studio and network. So they like sent whoever didn't get the job away. And then they
Ooh.
brought all of us together to do like a photo shoot, because they needed things to move, I guess, really quickly.
Mm.
Because they had some things that they were going to launch, like we were going to be on the Rice Krispie box, which I actually have right here. And so it like they told us like right then and there, you booked the job. Let's go into and do some like publicity stuff. It was wild. I didn't know that there was another way to do it, so it just seemed perfectly normal. Then later on, when I'm like auditioning for other shows and going to the studio and the network, you go home and then you have to wait to get the call whether you got it or not.
Yeah, yeah. That's absolutely wonderful for you guys who made it, and absolutely terrifyingly horrific for everybody
Yeah.
else, it sounds like. But hey, things worked out. And look, we're gonna skip Say by the Bell. We're not gonna I'm just kidding. I'm just freaking people out. People would be unsubscribing by the horde at this point. We're gonna get to it in a minute. I'd like to just hop around to a couple other things you did before we get into it, because so many questions that people have sent in to me to ask you about Saved by the Bell, the new class. So let's put it off for a second, and I want to ask you about 90210, because that came pretty. How long did that come to you after Saved by the Bell?
Pretty quickly, like right after Saved by the Bell, it was like I was on 90210.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was like right away.
and were you actually on the show? I know you were there on a recurring basis. Were you there with Tiffani
Yeah,
Thiessen? Okay.
yeah.
I mean, spoiler alert, that's one of the things that people wanted to know is, did you guys connect? Is it like an SNL thing or like an Army thing? Like, are you all both like
Yeah. Oh,
automatically
first of all,
connecting?
she's incredible, and she's so kind and so lovely. And we had met prior doing like publicity, because when they brought on the new class, the original guys were doing the college years, and she was in the college years before she booked after the college years was only on for a season, I think. And so then they picked her up on and it was funny because like the 90210 like show would pick up people from Saved by the Bell and bring them on after. It's like it was like graduating from high school to college. So yeah, she was just amazing. Like even my little brother, I guess, who visited the set, we have pictures, she's just like a ray of sunshine. So she was just wonderful. And of course we had this connection.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
We've talked to other people who are connected to one show or the other, or some aspect of the Aaron Spelling universe. And it feels like once you find favor in that world, like there's a place for you and more opportunities can come from it. But we've seen lots of people bounce around from Aaron Spelling show to Aaron Spelling show. And then of course you wind up being a part of Pacific Palisades. Is that sort of the path for you?
For sure. I had met Aaron Spelling through Tori at like, I can't remember exactly if it was maybe Tori's birthday party, but I had met him. It was like right as I was finishing Saved by the Bell, and he said, "I'm going to put you on 90210." And I was like, okay, cool. Like, that's awesome. And sure enough, I got called in, and I read for the part of Chloe, and I did those 4 episodes. And it was a big episode. It was a big thing too, because I tried to break up David and Donna, and like people did not like that. So it was like my character was a talked about character, which was pretty cool. And then And then after that, because I did 90210, he offered me the role on Pacific Palisades. So he was incredible. Aaron Spelling was amazing.
It's a really interesting and similar trajectory with Tiffani because you leave Saved by the Bell, you go on 90210, and you kind of become the antagonist, right? Like you're the
Mhm.
people that the fans are now rooting against after playing this very sweet character for
Totally.
years on Saved by the Bell. How'd that feel?
Yeah, it was interesting too because like it's of course what you want, I was still pretty young, but having played like a goody two shoes, you want to have a little bit more risque thing. And then sure enough, like I'm trying to seduce David. 2-0, and looking back, I'm like, oh my God. But it is something that like you think that that's what you need to do because you've just done this like super sweet and wholesome role that now you need to be like, and that just happens with just being 18, 19, going into your early 20s, etc.
Yeah, that's kind of what people do in life. It just so happens that you were
Exactly.
doing it on
I
camera.
was just doing it on TV. Which is so funny.
Um, so you talked about being in the soap opera world.
Yeah.
Um, very different atmosphere, very different pace. How did you enjoy that? Like that every day going in there and banging
It
out
was
new
definitely an
episodes?
adjustment. Like it
Yeah.
it, it was because and this is before like cell phone recording devices. So I remember I had to get like the guys told me you have to get this like like how journalists would record stories, and
Yeah, the
interview
little
people.
recorder.
I had
Yeah.
this little like digital recorder,
Mhm.
and to like say my lines and have them said I would like record the other person's lines so I could say because every day was a new episode. But it was what it was an amazing place to work. All my children was incredible also because it was like almost like an acting boot camp too, and you could really try out a lot of things and it just flexed your memory muscles and how to make things like seem it's like you're saying it for the first time, all those kind of things. So i I would go back on a soap opera now. It's such a great gig. It's so much fun, and it is tough, especially like I didn't even have as much dialogue as some of the people that were working every single day, and they would get their script like that. I'm like, how do you even do this? But it was really, really cool, and it really helped me, I think, grow as an actor as well during that time.
Cool.
Yeah,
Um, Yeah, and again, and then you find yourself, and I know we're jumping around here a little bit, but
that's okay.
raising the bar has come up. Of course, you on a show with Mark Paul Gosselaar that also drives the Saved by the Bell fan fiction writers like crazy. Just the possibilities of you two in the same world.
It was
Um,
wild because it was wild even for me. Obviously, growing up with the show, and I've been friendly with the cast. I was always really good friends with Mario, and then working with Tiffani. So when Raising the Bar came up, and I they did I wasn't in the pilot. I wasn't in the pilot. I came in after. I think I must have read for the pilot, and then I got picked up for the first episode once the pilot got picked up to series. And yeah, it was just so funny to think because there are photos of like Mark Paul and I when I was 14 years old, like on some game show, and just like in the Teen Beat magazines. He is, first of all, an incredible actor, super, super kind human, um, so generous and so thoughtful of cast and crew. Like he is just someone that you want to work with because he's just awesome on top of being super funny and yeah, just all around great. And our characters were linked, like our storylines were combined, and so it was just so fun. But people were like, it was weird for me too because I'm like, it is kind of hilarious to think that someone from the new class, and then of course like the star of the original Saved by the Bell.
mhm.
So yeah, we did that show for 2 seasons. We were so bummed when it didn't continue because it was really, really great television in my opinion. And I love doing legal dramas, and he was so friggin' good. And the whole cast, I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, I have to ask you. We've talked about a lot of different things you've done, a lot of different genres. What is something that you haven't done that you would love to do at some point?
Oh, that's a good question. The thing is that like when you're working as an actor, and then when you're not working as an actor, you're always thinking you're never going to work again. So just the idea of continuing of, I say this all the time. I've been a SAG member since 1993.
Mm.
And but all of the entertainment business has changed so much. And of course, the pandemic shut down the entertainment industry. Because I was on a show right before that, right before the pandemic, that was like the perfect show for me at that time. So it's just sometimes I'm like, I don't know, I really like television. I would love to get back to sitcoms because it's just I love making people laugh, and it's something that from Saved by the Bell I did go into doing a lot more dramas,
Yeah.
and then it kind of TV has changed a little bit. They weren't doing it as many sitcoms anymore, but I would really just like to continue, working on in and around television. Of course, I would love to do film too, but I love TV.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Now, let's get to what people have been waiting for. We got flooded. We got so many questions to you about Saved by the Bell, the new class. A lot of people repeating questions. I've kind of condensed it to try to get to what everybody's wanted to know and all cover all the angles and everything. But I'm going to take the first question here because you brought up something very interesting about performing in front of a studio audience, so to speak. Now, this was your first TV gig aside from commercials. So this was brand new to you, fashion show at school aside,
Yeah.
being in front of a crowd, still kind of a new cool thing. Did you take to that very quickly and easily?
So we of course had, 1 week of rehearsal, and but the very first time I'm on camera and I come out to speak, I completely froze when we were filming on the Friday night taping. Like I froze. I opened my mouth to speak and nothing came out. So it was definitely like an adjustment. But then once I started to get used to it, oh my gosh, you would thrive for the audience laughter, like, to hit your lines, to hit the punchlines, to hit the jokes.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit, scary at first. And like I said, I totally was there like, okay, we're going to take that back because I didn't say anything. But yeah, and we were all pretty much new and not established at all. And so that format was definitely new for me. And then you just kind of grew to love it.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned it before, of course, everybody knew Say by the Bell, but what was your relationship like with the show? Were you a fan going into this audition? Did you know a long time ahead of time you were going into this audition? What was your excitement level for specifically trying out for Say by the Bell?
Yeah, so I definitely saw the show many times after school, like all of us did in the 90s. But I I just remember knowing about it and being excited about it. Um, but it wasn't like, there was so much great television also in the 90s too
Mhm.
that I would watch. But yeah, it was really exciting. But at that age, at that time, it wasn't like, I was losing my mind. Like I do remember it being a big deal because it was like, oh my gosh, they're on all the time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Cool. Um, Rebooting a show, and I don't know if we'd call this a reboot. We can get into the terminology, but we don't need to. But um, you're restarting the show with a new cast, basically a new chapter to the legacy of the show. It's such a weird thing because when those guys started the show, the whole genre of this kind of show for kids that age was new. And then they
Right.
established this thing and it became huge. And now you guys have to step into those shoes and it's a whole different kind of pressure. Is that something that you felt?
So they certainly kept that away from us. Like we didn't really feel like, oh, we have to do, you know, all, all I know is that it definitely did well because we kept getting picked up.
Oh,
And up until I still to this day, 30 some odd years later, get recognized for that show. So it definitely had an audience. We were not like, it's funny because as you go on later in life and you do other television shows and you do pilots and you're waiting to get picked up and you're really checking out like the numbers, the ratings.
mhm.
We were not ever looking at those. We just know we just kept going and getting picked up. And it was just like, okay, and we were still so young. I was, 14, 15, 16. years old. So like it was definitely, I think, seen by a lot of people, like I said, because 10 years later, people would go up to me and be like, did we go to high school together? Even now, did we go to high school together? Did you go to so-and-so high school? And I'm like, no, not that one. Not that one.
Oh my goodness. People forget that the new class actually went on like 3 years longer, 3 seasons longer than the original one. So,
Yeah,
that legacy just kept going and going and
for
going.
sure.
Um, we've heard a lot about relationships. Now, this is coming from somebody I haven't heard a lot about relationships, but this person has heard a lot about interrelationships of the original cast. Can you share any stories about you and your castmates, how you got along? Was there friendships? Was there dating? Did anything continue after the show was over? Do you remain friends with any of them or stay in
So
contact?
I'm very friendly with Sarah Lancaster, who came in as a guest star, I think in season 1 and then they made her a regular in season 2, if I remember correctly. And then it was so funny because, you know, 7 or 8 years ago, or maybe 10 years ago now, I don't even know. We got cast in a Lifetime movie together called The Preacher's Mistress. And so Sarah Lancaster is definitely somebody that I've stayed in touch with, throughout the years. And I love her dearly. I've seen Samantha actually at Sarah's house, Jonathan Angel here and there. And then nobody else really. Well, I'd seen Dennis a few times when I was on Raising the Bar, but not too much. But we were kids, so we definitely would fight. We were teens, young teens. We would, have little fights, and we would get called up to the office, things like that. But all in all, it was just always just a great experience, and we all cared for each other, and yeah, it was cool. There was always like there was always like new people coming on. So like every season, you just didn't know if you were gonna be on the next season or not. So, but all in all, it was great. But Sarah, I would say, is the one I'm the closest with.
That's great. And by the way, I would love for you, even if you have to lie, just to tell us all that when you guys did get in trouble and had to be talked to, it happened on the set in Building's office. That would be just amazing.
I know.
You mentioned Dennis Haskins. What was it like, the OG of Saved by the Bell, right? Like he's the guy who was on that show, I have to imagine, almost every episode of its entire run. What was it like? There's so many stories about what an interesting, entertaining guy it sounds like. What was it like to be around and work with him?
He was great, and he was working with a bunch of kids, and he was still so like kind and patient, and he's actually a great actor too. Yeah, he was just wonderful, and made it all easy for us because of course we were like the new kids, and he had already been established having done the original one. So it was really good. It was like he was just amazing and helped all of us. He was great.
Do you have, of your time on the show, a favorite episode that stands out?
Oh gosh, I haven't thought about that in a long time. I remember like they really did try to incorporate things that we were doing at that time in school, and I was really into like gymnastics, so we did this like gymnastics episode that was really fun. And they brought like the people that I had trained with in my real school, to help us to like make routines and have like a gymnastics episode. So that one I do remember was really fun. We had such a great time. Like there was, again, it was so long ago now, like so 30 years ago. It's so crazy. But we would do like Friday night before the tapings. I also do remember that we had like the best craft service. So there's like little things that I remember that I would love to eat because they would bring them out on Friday night for our taping nights. They had these little like mini corn dogs that were like my favorite. But we would do the huddles and always do a huddle before our show, before we went out and did the filmed in front of the studio audience. But episodes, there were so many. When we filmed up in La Crescenta, which is the area where I grew up, we filmed at at the country club, so I was going 5 seconds from my house to the country club, which was so
Nice.
funny. But nothing too specific, but the gymnastic one was really fun.
Cool. You mentioned the cast, the ever-changing cast, which was a hallmark of, all the years of the new class. Even if it wasn't a full turnover, there'd always be somebody new and somebody
Yeah.
kind of moving on out. What to your understanding was the general reasoning for such a constant turnover of the cast?
I really don't know. I think whatever decisions, I think from season 1 to season 2, the only time we were really aware of that was the fact that they were bringing back Dustin Diamond. So I
Mhm.
think because they were bringing back Dustin Diamond, I think they probably, maybe couldn't have the Weasel character and Screech. So that was like the first shift in the cast changes. But yeah, I really I don't know. That's really the only one that I was really, I'm like, oh, that I understand sort of now, why they would do that, is bringing on Dustin's character. But other than that, it just seemed like something that they did. I don't know.
What about yourself now? After season 3, you're wrapping up. What was your mindset at that time? Was that a decision that you were a part of? What led to?
Yeah, so we're always like, again, when you're young, you always think, and then you're on a show, you always think, oh well, what's the next thing for me?
Mhm.
You're on like a sitcom, which now, of course, is like something I want to do. But
Yeah.
when you're doing a sitcom, you want to do drama. When you're doing drama, you want to do a sitcom. So it just sort of came to that point of just wanting to kind of expand my career, and and having just thoughtful conversations around that, and going on my way to continue my acting career.
Yeah, and you
Yeah,
and you had said
18 years old.
you had gotten 90210 soon after that. Generally speaking, though, everyone has their stories, especially specifically leaving this show. Everything from Mark Paul, who's done so much great TV and found good opportunities, to Elizabeth Berkley, who went into what seemed like an amazing opportunity to star in this movie called Showgirls that turned out to be this very unique part of pop culture.
Yeah.
Um, what was your general experience like? Like, did you feel like you were typecast a little bit just because you had Saved by the Bell on your resume?
Luckily, no, I didn't, which was great. Which was, I think, especially then, there was that potential. And I think having just been on just for the 3 years, although I think I did like 65 episodes.
Mhm.
Um, it was just like the perfect thing to not be typecast. But then, of course, I went into this kind of little bit more, risque role kind of thing. So I didn't feel that sense of being sort of typecast. And now more than ever, I just feel proud of the show, that that so many people grew up with it. Um, and certainly, if they ever brought back like a new class thing and asked me to be a part of it, I would immediately say yes, So it was all in all like a wonderful experience.
Isn't
Otherwise,
it
probably wouldn't even talk about it.
isn't it amazing that hasn't happened? I mean, I know we had sort of the revival of Saved by the Bell with the original cast and then new like the
Yeah.
whole other kind of single camera show, but just to go back and do something like in front of a studio audience, like just
Oh my
bring
gosh,
back.
I think about that all the time. I'm like, it would be so awesome if they like brought, and they could bring back like the Lindsey character as like a teacher at Bayside, and then it could be her son, could be one of the kids of the new class. But I've always had like, I would always think of ideas, especially with how television is changing and the reboot, and even before this new Saved by the Bell got rebooted. I had already had those thoughts, like, oh, because I had seen the landscape of television, having been in the business for 30 plus years. I saw that was happening, and so when it happened, I was like, oh, this makes sense. But it would be so amazing if they brought it back in a classic way, in
Yeah.
the same sort of vintage, like it would be vintage now, like in the same sort of format, the 4 camera, the sets, the song, all the things, but with the cast that's, obviously if they brought me back to put me in Bayside, would be that I would be a teacher or something like that. I think it would be so freaking cool. And I think people would love it.
Yeah. I think absolutely
Yeah,
there's a place for it somewhere. It's
for
just
sure.
yeah. We'll get to it's going to happen at some point. God, by the way, I want to point out for fans of Lindsey, by the way, we've mentioned your risque moments on 90210 several times, and every single time you've done this.
Yeah,
So
because I had to
I want to point it out. That is Lindsey's international sign for risque. We're
you can
learning
have
all kinds.
a little wiggle because I'm at the piano with David and I like open up my shirt. So, and I'm like, I just recently got to see some of those scenes back, and it was so funny.
To go from Say by the Bell to
It's
that, like,
hilarious. And then
yeah.
I open the door and Donna's there, and I'm like with it just in my bra. Oh my God.
I also caught and didn't realize, but love the fact you had mentioned that you had been on that life. What was the name of that Lifetime movie you mentioned?
The Preacher's
The
Mistress.
pre. Now that is a leap for you two.
It
From
was incredible. Like, we had so much fun on that set. All we did was laugh because it was so ridiculous. And like she, she was the preacher's mistress. I was the preacher's mistress. I tried to like kill her. It was so perfectly Lifetime. And we just had a wonderful time. Like, it was a very quick shoot. I think we filmed in Texas. So we were like out of town for 3 or 4 weeks or whatever it was. And yeah, it was hilarious. And then we actually got together when it premiered. She came over to my house and we had some wine and we were watching the movie together. We were just like, this is so awesome. I wish I would have been like doing more like internet content. I mean, I still really don't, but I'm gonna start eventually. And that, because when we were watching that, I think people would have loved to have seen us together, watching our film.
Gotcha. Now, one more Save by the Bell question, and this is a pretty good one. We talked about your favorite episode. Do you have a favorite memory of being in front of that studio audience, like just some scene that just went really well, that got a really big laugh, just something that really worked, that stuck with you from those
Gosh,
days?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head. It just became it was a weekly thing for us. So certainly you do remember there are times where like things don't land and you're like, uh-oh, we're gonna have to make this one funny or figure out a way, and they're constantly rewriting on the spot with sitcoms, like, because the audience is the biggest tell as to whether something works or not.
Yeah.
But all in all, it was just such an energy every time we would come out out on Friday nights. It's something you can't even explain. I know there's audience warm up guys and gals that, get them all pumped up, but there's just this like roar, and it was all of it. Shooting in front of a studio audience is incredible. I really hope that I get to do it again.
We're putting it out there. We're putting that
Yeah,
out there into the world.
absolutely.
And as we wait for that, what else is going on? What's going on now? What's going on next? What's happening in the world of you?
So it's funny because, like I said, right before the pandemic, I was doing a show called Deputy with Stephen Dorff, and it was like the perfect show for me. I always make a joke, depending on what's going on in my life, that like, when Mark Paul was on the series, he was number 1 on the call sheet, which means you're carrying the show. And I'm always like, I'd like to be like number 8 or 9 on the call sheet. Like, just come in for a couple days, do my thing, and then leave. But so I was doing Deputy, and then of course the pandemic shut down the entertainment industry, and then it picked up a tiny bit. But then we had the actors and the writer strike. So I actually I started like kind of dabbling. I've never had another like any other job in my life other than acting. And then you're like, okay, well now I realize that I need to get another job if this acting thing isn't going to pick up. So I started dabbling like with online resale, and then I found this hilarious and amazing shopping app called Whatnot. And so you can find me on that app selling clothes, selling toys, selling like fun things, fashion, sunglasses or whatever. And I also engage with like an audience there as well, because it's chat based, and it's like a bidding. It's really, I was a shopper first, and I was like, I can do this. This looks like fun. So I've been dabbling over there.
That's awesome. That's it.
Yeah.
What a throwback from the 90s, thinking about like the popularity of QVC and the Home Shopping Network. And now
That's
we're all
literally
kind
what
of,
it is. It's like QVC on
yeah,
your phone. Yeah, because also with acting too, like now that the strikes are over, both my husband and I are actors. I met my husband on his a show that he was starring on called The Glades, and it's like it's out of our control. So of course auditions are starting to trickle in. The landscape again has changed drastically. But auditions are coming in, which is really exciting too, because that's part of the work and we love it. Now we're like so excited to put auditions down and even go back because, since the pandemic, a lot of auditions were self tapes.
yeah.
So getting back into rooms and being able to like crush your comedic scenes, or do your drama stuff. As that's happening, you have to sort of find other ways. Also, like to fulfill that kind of entertainer that I have in me, and with Whatnot, like I can do that too, which is so awesome because you're kind of like thinking on your feet, wanting to, making people laugh. It's really cool.
Oh
So
man. So listen, those of you out there who want to connect with Lindsey and maybe buy some stuff, you
yeah,
go on Whatnot
yep.
because she's not just selling things. Clearly, you're ready to put on a show.
Oh my god! If people, I love hearing from like my friends, like, oh my god, Natalia, like it was so funny. Your shows are so funny because it's me, chatting it up and just yeah, and being silly. Yeah, it's really cool.
So, how do they find you, and where else do you want people to follow
So
you?
I my shop Little Lotus Shop. So that's where I'll be.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah,
And
on the Whatnot app.
if you buy enough stuff, you might even get the shoulder shake.
Yeah,
You never
yeah,
know
I
what's
shoulder
going to
shake
happen.
quite a bit on Whatnot. It's really fun.
Awesome. Well, this has been really fun, and I'm so glad that we were able to come here. And clearly, there are still legions of fans who love you and love Saved by the Bell, the new class, and this
Aw.
idea that it's going to come back again in some form. I mean, it just feels inevitable. So,
I
all
mean,
we can hope
yeah,
is, yeah, we and
let's hope
so
so.
many people would love it and would love you to be a part of it. So let's put
Aw,
that
this
out
is so
there.
fun. And I love it
Abs-
too. Like it's so exciting having the 90s like kind of get picked back up again. So yeah, and Saved by the Bell was just, in everybody's life at that time. So yeah, I loved doing it and it's just fun to talk about again and kind of bring me back to that time. So thank
Very
you.
cool. Oh, no problem. Thank you. Hey, thank all of you for joining us this time. This has been such a fun episode. Make sure that you like us, you subscribe, you do all the things that you do on all the social media and everywhere we are to keep us growing as always. And we will see you next time. Thank you so much, Natalia.
Thank you.